to dedicate today's Dharma talk to Jimmy Carter, who passed away this week at the age of 100, the oldest president of this republic. Now, he meant something to me. I became a citizen in 1976, and Jimmy Carter was my first president. He was very unusual in that people would think of him as a peanut farmer, but he was in fact a governor he was a peanut farmer, but he was also a governor of Georgia. He was an engineer, and he was in the military. He was in the Navy. He actually served in the submarine. So he was a pretty amazing guy. He was also a Christian, a very devoted Christian. We don't know what being Christian mean until he actually left the office. He dedicated his whole life in following the footsteps of Christ, Jesus Christ. So I'm gonna dedicate today's class to him. I'm gonna talk about his one of my favorite quotes. He had many favorite quotes, but there was one that I really liked that actually tie into what we've been talking about since last week. And what we've been talking about since last week is a follow-up on the discussions that we have on politics and positivity. And so last week I talked about the 12 steps to maintain positivity, or more precisely, the 12 steps to rise above negative emotions. And it's important, I think, to sort of repeat the first three steps. The first three steps, according to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, is honesty, hope, and surrender. And my interpretation of that is, when I say honesty, is being very honest with ourselves. Admit that we are all capable of negative emotions. And what the negativity outside of us is just a trigger. It's just a trigger. And once we're triggered, even though the whatever it is causes the negative emotions have gone away, we are kind of still living in the memory of that, and we can't get out. Okay, so we have to admit that when we're negative, yes, it was triggered by someone else, but ultimately the responsibility rests with ourselves. Okay, now the second part is hope. And if there's no hope, there's no point of being honest with yourself. There needs to be a hope. The idea of hope is that there is a teaching. There is a teaching that shows how we can heal ourselves, not only physically, but mentally and spiritually. We have to be open to that, right? We have to be open to the possibility that if we take control of ourselves, then we can let go of those negative emotions. That's hope. And finally, it's what we call surrender. Don't try to protect yourself as if nothing happens. It did happen. Those negativity did happen to you. You were invaded. You have to be honest with that. And you have to say, okay, I got it. I accept it. But I'm just going to let it go now. I'm going to feel it, accept it, and I'm going to let it go. So that's the repeat of what we talked about last week. But it's important because it's based on the idea that our existence is not just physical, right? So I talk about the 5 standards. What's physical is eye, a nose, a tongue, an ear, a skin, and a brain. When we die, none of that exists. They all go back to the universe. So our existence is beyond that, right? So I talk about that. First was the form, which I think of it as a funnel, taking the physics and then the physiology. The second one is what I just call sensation, right? Is when those organs, those sensors, taking the physics and turn it into a neurology. All the nerve ending ends into our spine. And then they get collected and go into a brain. That's the part where we actually make a decision and where we have like or dislike. And spiritual practice is all about knowing the difference and knowing how to accept it and not follow. Because if you follow, then the next one is the volition where all the negative emotion becomes negative action, and then it eventually leaves what we call karma. Okay. Now the worst part is that the karma comes back, and it becomes the seed for the next thought. So even though the negativity has gone, you're still consumed by it. Okay, so that's a very important part. Okay, so that's the basis for the first three, which is why you have to be honest, why you have to believe that there is hope, and why you have to surrender yourself to that practice. Okay, so I'm going to skip courage, integrity, willingness, humility, and then I'm going to say love. Love is important. Love is important. Love is the key. Love of mankind, love of beings, love of yourself is key, and what we call loving kindness. I'm thinking about this. Loving kindness, compassion, empathy, and equanimity, those are the key. Those are the key, right? As opposed to the hate, the fear, the division, right? And all that. The difference is like you're holding a torch, and if you're willing to share that, it becomes the light. If you're not willing to share that, it becomes a fire, and ultimately it will burn you. So that's why it's important to stay away, to rise above the negativity, because you don't want to be consumed by that. You don't want to be burned by that. And that's the key. I rather lift it up and let it shine, become the light, as opposed to just closing myself and blame it on everything else. So love is very important. And I often talk about God here, and I said God as I know her, because that's just my belief. It doesn't need to be your belief, but I do believe that there is positive energy out there. We just give it a different name. I believe that God is loving kindness, God is compassion, God is empathetical. God never labels me. God does not judge me. God does not care who I am or whether I'm worthy or not. She is grace. So I think this is something that we need to tap into, is what is really inside of us, and not all that chaos and fear and all that. And I think of that as just a black cloud that is clouding us, right? We cannot turn away from the sun, just like we cannot turn away the love that is within us. So the quote that I want to give has to do with responsibility, which is the 9th of the 12 steps. And I said this, I said, God as I know her already have lots to do. She's too busy for me. So she's not going to live my life for me. She cannot change my karma. Only I can. The responsibility rests within me. Jimmy Carter has a wonderful quote. I love it. He said, God is not my personal valet. It's not my personal valet. God is not my personal God. She is not my valet. Right? She does not build a protective fence around me to keep me from trouble, fulfill my personal desires, or guarantee my success. However, through prayer, God offers me comfort, reassurance, satisfaction, courage, hope, and peace. I love that. God is not my valet.